Hey guys, how is everybody doing? And as of late, I have been reviewing the Resident Evil video game franchise. I reviewed the four remakes of the original four Resident Evil movies, and I continue to review two more of them. And I've had some Resident Evil fever leading up to the release of Resident Evil Requiem. So I decided, hey, since I'm reviewing the video games, why not go ahead and review the movie franchise? Now, yes, there is a new one coming out sometime in August or September, sometime during the late summer, early fall season, with Zach Krager's new Resident Evil film. And pretty much what I've seen from the reports on that and news on that movie, it's not going to be a Resident Evil movie, and it just sounds like a generic zombie movie because it sounds like that he doesn't want to really make a Resident Evil movie. And I've had some Resident Evil fever. I wanted to rewatch these movies again because I've had that itch for it. So I've decided to review all seven live action Resident Evil movies. And yeah, like I just said there, I'm going to be reviewing the seven live action movies. I will not be reviewing the animated movies on like Netflix or movies that went straight to video. I won't be talking about those movies. I don't have the urge to watch them. They don't look very good to me. They don't interest me whatsoever. So I will not be reviewing those, and I will only be reviewing the Paul W.S. Anderson franchise and Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. So I'm going to be reviewing those movies and then do a big ranking of all those movies at the very end. And lots of other Resident Evil videos that I have planned to do. So with that all out of the way, here are my thoughts on the 2002 Resident Evil. And before I begin, I do have a lot of history with the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil franchise. I grew up with these movies. I grew up watching these movies before I ever really started playing any of the Resident Evil games. I had played a little bit of the games. I believe at the time, I had just played the Resident Evil 7 game and the Resident Evil 2 remake. Those were the two that I had played at the time before I even watched these movies. Hell, I think I even watched some of these movies before I even played any of the games because back in the day I used to watch people play video games before I actually even played them. So I have a lot of history and nostalgia with this franchise to where I am going to have a little nostalgic bias and a little bias towards this franchise because I really enjoyed them when I was a kid to where I kind of enjoy them now. And I don't really know what my thoughts are going to be on this franchise going forward because it has been a long time since I have seen them. This is my first time watching them in years. So maybe my opinion will shift around because I am a bigger Resident Evil fan. I have played more of the games, I have more history with them. So yeah, I do have a lot of nostalgia, and I do have a lot of nostalgia for this first movie specifically because this was one of my favorite horror movies growing up, and this was my favorite Resident Evil movie growing up. So yeah, I was just wanted to give a little history buff on that. So with all the stalling out of the way, here are my thoughts on the movie. Starting off with my positives on the 2002 Resident Evil movie is I really like the music in this movie, and from what I remember, I don't really think the music in this movie transfers to the other films. I'm pretty sure the music is in this movie alone, which is kind of a shame because the music in this is pretty badass to where it is very early 2000s, late 90s, where it kind of has that like I don't want to say disco, but like kind of late night feel, like late night party music kind of in some moments, and it's also kind of really heavy metal. Like there's a lot of like action sequences going on with like the zombies attacking the group of like Alice and the whole group of soldiers or whatever that were met with in the movie. There's a lot of moments to where the music is very heavy metal in those sequences because it's like a lot of action going on, and the music in it is really cool. And the kind of the main theme, I guess you could say, uh, not theme, main song in this movie is like this cool retro like song that is probably the most famous of the whole movie, where it's kind of been on my TikTok feed with like showing me advertisements for like this debit card thing for Resident Evil or whatever. And I really think the music in this movie really is really cool. And like I said, it's kind of a shame that we didn't see it throughout the rest of the franchise because it is pretty cool music. And I just really enjoyed it. I really like this heavy metal late night type music that they got going for it. It really matches this film and what it's going for, especially at the beginning where like the whole action starts. It goes da 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 da. Like I really enjoy it. It kind of gets your adrenaline going at the beginning of the movie. Like you kind of know it's an action film. You kind of get this like action film vibe from it just from the music alone. I really enjoyed it. It was one of my. It's one of the best parts of this movie. And again, it's a shame we don't get more of it in the franchise. And I'll get into more of this later on into the video. I really like how this movie really kind of makes you feel like you are watching a Resident Evil movie. Now, I'll get into this later. It's not a very good adaptation of Resident Evil, but I do feel it does like a pretty good job of making you feel like you're experiencing Resident Evil. Like when you go into the laboratory or the hive that they call it in this movie, the hive reminded me a lot of like those moments in Resident Evil games where you're going through the laboratory, which is basically almost every single Resident Evil game where you end up finding a laboratory. Like literally name a Resident Evil game and you go through a laboratory in that game. It's it's basically like a yearly tradition type thing with the Resident Evil franchise. It's a tradition to go to the laboratory in each game, and the Hive is basically that. And it makes you kind of feel like, oh, because of fans of the Resident Evil franchise, when they go in the Hive and they see the whole laboratory and they see the whole place that they're exploring, it's just like, oh, this kind of reminds me of the first game or the second game, whatever it reminds you of. It reminds you of that, and then you also have like the Umbrella soldiers coming in, where you kind of get those feelings from like Resident Evil 3 and stuff like that. And of course, you have the zombies and the zombie dogs and the lickers and stuff and all that. Like with all those uh creatures and monsters showing up from the games in this, to where it kind of adds to that Resident Evil experience, which of course they're going to include the zombies, because the zombies are basically like the face of Resident Evil at this point, because people think it's a zombie franchise when it's really more than that. But yeah, I really think that this movie does a good job of making you feel like you're experiencing Resident Evil and making you like experience what you're going through, what you would go through in a video game. It's not a very good adaptation, but it does do a very good job of making you feel like you are at least experiencing it. My next positive is I really enjoy the introduction and the creation of the character of Alice into this franchise, because Alice is not a major character at all in any of the Resident Evil video games. Like, she is not a character in any of those games, and she is an original character made for this franchise. And a lot of people have an issue with her because they feel like she takes away the glory and the moments away from characters that deserve it from like the video games that should be showing up, like Leon, Jill, Claire, Chris. Uh, Basically any of the big characters from the franchise should be getting those big moments and not just this new original character. But but like I said, like I talked about at the beginning, and like I said, I grew up with this franchise, and Alice was one of those reasons of why I always went back to rewatch these movies. I really enjoy the character of Alice, who's played by Paul W. S. Anderson's wife. I cannot remember her name. I'm never good with names, but I really enjoy her in this franchise. Now, yeah, it does get a little bit tedious down the line, where they're constantly cloning her or bringing her back to life after she supposedly died or whatever. So yeah,
Couldn't you just stay dead?
I I will end up getting that into that later on in the franchise. But overall, from this first movie and throughout the whole franchise, I have always really enjoyed the character of Alice. I've always loved the inclusion of her in this franchise. I've always really enjoyed her. I always thought she was a badass. She has been one of my personal favorite final girls of all time in horror films. I've always really enjoyed the character of Alice. I think she's a badass. I love how she originally worked with Umbrella, and then now she doesn't, and she basically betrayed them and all that. So I just really enjoy her characters throughout this whole franchise. I think she's a badass, and she is one of my personal favorite final girls in horror. And I've always kind of said, and I know I'm in the minority of this, I would have loved to see the Resident Evil video games kind of create an Alice like character. Like, you can honestly bring in the actress that plays Alice and kind of have her play a role in one of the Resident Evil games, like not even as Alice. Like, I would love to see them bring in her actresses to play like a role in a Resident Evil game, like after Requiem comes out, which we all know we're going to get another one after Requiem, because we all know that's going to be a huge success. And I would love to see them possibly bring her and put her in one of the Resident Evil games. That is a wish of mine. I think that would be awesome. Maybe there's a way they can include Alice into the Resident Evil video game franchise. I don't know, but I've always really enjoyed this character and what they do with her. Which, yeah, it does get tedious down the line, but I've always enjoyed her, and especially in these first few movies, maybe like the first two or three. I think anybody and their mothers that have seen this movie will tell you that the best part of this movie is that whole laser sequence in this movie, where they're going through like this tunnel to get to the Red Queen, as they call her. They're trying to get to her to do something to her. I can't remember what they're doing. And there's this whole sequence to where she's trying to get rid of him. And there's a whole laser sequence where this guy gets cut in half. This girl gets her head cut in half. gets cut off, and this guy's fingers are fucking cut off, and then there's this like cool sequence where this guy kind of realizes the pattern, like he jumps up onto the ceiling, grabs up to it, he's ready for it to do it again, but then it just fills up the whole room, like to little mini squares, and then he just gets fucking turned into pizza. I don't think it takes anybody to tell you that that sequence is awesome. I love the music in it. I love the horror to it, really. And I think even when I was younger, I always said that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen at that time because that was really a cool sequence at the time for me. So yeah, it doesn't really take a scientist to tell you that that sequence is awesome and is the best sequence in this whole movie. And I think anybody who's seen this movie can tell you that. And my final positive, and this is something that I realized rewatching it recently, is that this movie has a lot of George A. Romero callbacks and basically just giving the tip of the cap to George A. Romero, who basically created the zombie subgenre that we know him as now. And this is literally something that I found out last night when I was preparing for this video, is that apparently George A. Romero originally wrote a script for a Resident Evil film, because apparently back in the heyday when he was making zombie movies after he made his Of the Dead trilogy with Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, which are some of the best horror movies ever made. Apparently, when the Resident Evil was when it was the big thing at the time and it was an up and coming thing, he wanted to make a movie on it because he was interested in it and he liked it, so he had like his secretary or something play the game and like record it and show him it so he can like take notes and write a script. And apparently he had a script, but then apparently there was no way that they could get the movie made without it being an NC-17 rating or something, right, like that, which might just end up being a lie, and so it just never came to fruition. And then the rights went to, and then uh, the creativeness went to Paul W.S. Anderson at the time, and that's kind of unfortunate that George A. Romero never made a Resident Evil movie because I think that would have been fucking awesome. So that's unfortunate, and I really enjoyed the George A. Romero zombie callbacks because he literally created the zombie subgenre that we know now. Like, there's literally a sequence that is right out of Dawn of the Dead where the guy opens the elevator and a bunch of zombies just like grab him and like pull him in and start eating him alive. Like, come on, that is straight out of Dawn of the Dead. And so there's a lot more in this movie that I could name, but I can't really think of on the top of my head. But there was a lot of them in this movie, and that I realized as I was watching the movie. Probably helps that I knew that George A. Romero was originally going to make a Resident Evil movie, but that never came to fruition, unfortunately. But yeah, there's a lot of George A. Romero callbacks in this movie that I really thought were cool. Now moving on to my mixed aspects, and I only have one, and Paul W.S. Anderson, whenever you hear that name, you kind of cringe nowadays. And one of those reasons is his dialogue and the acting. The dialogue and the acting in this movie, man, good God, and it only gets worse from here, and I remember that too. His dialogue and acting has never been great because there's a lot of dialogue to where it's just like it comes out flat out corny and just flat out weird. There's like moments to where the way that people are like saying it or acting, it doesn't really come off the right way. Like, it seems like someone is trying to be angry, but it just comes off as them as like tired or something. But the acting in this movie has always been a problem for me. And it's just Paul W.S. Anderson way. Like, that's just how he is, and that's what his movies are. Like, you can look at any movie in his filmography and you can say that. Look at Mortal Kombat. Like, you can watch Mortal Kombat, and I think you would realize that just from that movie. Now that I think about it, now I'm sitting here thinking about it, Paul W.S. Anderson is kind of like Rob Zombie in a way, but at the same time, not really. The way that they're similar is that, well, bad dialogue, pretty lazy acting, and casting his wife in all of his movies. Who knew? But now moving on to my negatives, and one of the biggest negatives of this movie, and probably one of the biggest negatives of this whole fucking franchise, the CGI in this movie is terrible. The CGI in this movie, even when I was younger, when I didn't really pay attention to stuff like that, the CGI in this movie is flat out bad. There's moments where like the liquor, like it looks straight like out of the video games. It literally looked like they took it out of one of the early Resident Evil games and they just put it in here. That's how bad it looks. And then there's like moments where I just think this is just flat out lazy. There are moments where they're like the first time we see the zombies, they come out of like the shadows or whatever, and their faces are supposed to be mauled off, but you can clearly tell it's CGI. Like, there's this guy with like his face like fucking eaten off right here, and then there's like a guy that doesn't even have a nose, his mouth is gone, he has an eye gone. You can clearly tell it's CGI. It just looks flat out terrible. And it's just like, dude, like this has to be laziness at this point. Like there is no way that this movie looks this bad. Why the fuck are you putting CGI on a fucking zombie's face? Put fucking makeup on him, dude. Like it is not that hard. Like this, I'm pretty sure the budget of this movie is like $30 million. Where the fuck did that money go? And I alluded to this earlier at the beginning of the video where I said that this movie does a good job of making you feel like you're experiencing Resident Evil, which it does. This movie does a very good job of making you feel like you're watching Resident Evil, making you experience like a situation that you would play in at the games or whatever. But as an adaptation of Resident Evil, this movie is bad. This movie has a lot of holes. It is missing a lot. It just does not adapt the story or the characters well at all. There's literally, I don't even think there's one Resident Evil character in this movie. Like, out of the whole main franchise, I don't think there is one Resident Evil character. There's only the liquor, there's the dogs, and there's the zombies. That's it. Everybody else is original. And oh, of course, you got fucking Umbrella. Other than that, there is nothing in this movie that says Resident Evil. Does the movie make you experience like it's something you would play in the games? Absolutely. I love the Hive. It reminds me of the laboratory, like I talked about. But it's an adaptation of Resident Evil. This movie is bad. It has a lot of holes. It's missing a lot of things that made those games special, and what could have made this movie special. And one of the things that makes it not a good Resident Evil adaptation is Paul W.S. Anderson himself saying that when he was making this movie, he wanted to be away from the video games. He did not want to directly adapt the video games, which is how you make a shitty video game adaptation when you are not using the direct fucking source. That is where video game adaptations go wrong. You can look at shit that actually takes the source of the video game and makes it into a movie or a TV show, and it does it fucking good. Look at The Last of Us. Besides season 2, because that one is very much divided. Look at season 1 of The Last of Us. That is one of the most beloved video game adaptations ever. Why? Because it took the fucking source. That is why it worked, and that is why it's so beloved by so many people. This movie does not do that. This is why video game adaptations fucking suck, because you don't use the goddamn source. And my final negative, and if anything, it's a pretty small thing, and I guess a little gore horror in me is a little upset again after I talked about Valentine, and now I'm talking about this where there's not enough gore. This movie is not overly violent at all. If anything, there's like literally no violence. There's like only parts where we see blood dripping because someone got bitten. And like we don't really see anyone get like eaten alive much with like they happened off screen. No one really dies, and even when the zombies die, it's not overly violent. Like, honestly, this movie could be PG-13. Like, honestly, I would not be shocked if you told me this movie was PG-13. Aside from Alice's actress, I forget her name. It's on the box right here. I'm gonna cheat. Milla Jovovich. I don't know how to say her last name. We're gonna call her Milla. The beginning of the movie where Milla's like naked when she's coming out of the shower, and you see like a little picture of her nipple. Uh, if you cut that out or like covered up her a little bit more, this movie could be easily PG-13. That tells you how unviolent this movie is, and yet again, that is another thing of why does not work as a Resident Evil movie, because those video games are violent as shit. Like there's literally fucking zombies' heads exploding sometimes when you shoot them. Like how can you make a Resident Evil movie and not make it violent? Like that doesn't make any sense. Overall, guys, I have a lot of nostalgia with this movie, and I enjoy it for just a little generic zombie movie and just a little bit of fun action, and just a little bit of a fun action movie. Would I recommend it to people that are huge Resident Evil fans? Probably not, but I do think that there are some people that could get a kick out of this movie. I enjoy the movie for what it is. I have a lot of nostalgia with it. I have a lot of fun with it. I enjoy it. Do I rewatch it a lot? Not lately, but when I was younger, I did. So if you are a Resident Evil fan, excuse me, if you are a Resident Evil fan, maybe give this movie a shot, but you're probably not going to be very happy. So what do you guys think about the first Resident Evil movie? Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Do you actually think this is a good Resident Evil adaptation? Or are you like me and a lot of other people and think this is a pretty bad adaptation, but a fun movie? Let me know in the comments below and we shall talk about it. If you like this video, like it. If you love to subscribe to the bell notifications so you will get notified for all my latest videos and for the rest of my Resident Evil review franchise. And once again, until my next video, I'll see you all next time.